Okay, let's dive into this. Picture it, if you will. It's a dark, foggy night deep in the backwoods of Kentucky. The wind is howling through the trees, the rusted steel of a towering bridge is just groaning in the darkness, and somewhere, hiding in the deep shadows, a creature waits patiently for its next victim, right? It sounds exactly like the plot of some late-night B-movie horror flick. But for the locals of Louisville, this isn't a movie script. It's a deeply ingrained, generations-old tale that has sparked, well, literally countless whispered conversations around campfires. Today, in this explainer, we're taking a structured look at the folklore, the fear, and the incredibly dark reality of one of America's absolute strangest local myths.
So, what has hooves, a blood-stained axe, and a thirst for revenge? Take a second to really imagine that combination. Honestly, what comes to mind? Is it some disgruntled lumberjack who had a terrible accident? Or maybe a really angry farm animal that finally just had enough of the barnyard? Well, no. What we're actually talking about today is one of the most bizarre, highly specific, and honestly oddly hilarious urban legends in all of American folklore. We are, of course, talking about the infamous Pope Lick monster, or as it's much more commonly and affectionately known by the locals who grew up around the Fisherville neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky, the Goat Man. The whole shebang of this legend centers around this bizarre creature supposedly haunting the area directly beneath an imposing railroad trestle bridge that spans right across Pope Lick Creek. And, as with any great local legend, the details surrounding the Goat Man are wonderfully weird.
Now, what's really interesting about this definition is that the Pope Lick monster isn't just your standard issue guy in a furry mask. Oh, no. It's a legendary part man, part goat, and part sheep creature. I mean, you've got to appreciate the absolute folklore specificity going on here. Apparently, just being a goat man simply wasn't frightening enough for the Fisherville residents. They needed a dash of sheep thrown into the genetic blender for good measure. Just imagine the sheer logistical nightmare of trying to find a pair of pants that accommodate human legs, goat hooves, and sheep's wool. It's almost comical when you actually break down the biology of it.
So how exactly does a man-goat-sheep hybrid come to exist in the first place? Well, the locals couldn't even settle on just one backstory for this guy. Some legends claim our monster was originally a circus freak, mistreated human-goat hybrid who escaped into the wild after a circus train violently derailed right there on the trestle, leaving him to roam the creek and vow eternal revenge on humanity. Very classic, very dramatic. A solid origin story. But hey, if the derailed train doesn't do it for you, another wildly popular version claims the monster is actually the twisted, reincarnated form of a local farmer. And why was he reincarnated as a monster? Naturally, because he sacrificed his own goats in exchange for satanic powers. So a mistreated circus runaway or a demonic goat sacrificing farmer. Whichever one you believe, he's probably not the kind of neighbor you want to invite over for a weekend barbecue.
But let's just say you do wander out to that trestle in the dead of night, and you actually run into him. This brings us to a very pressing, practical question. How does the monster actually claim its victims? If you're a demonic goat-sheep man with a massive chip on your shoulder, what exactly is your game plan for terrorizing the locals?
I absolutely love how unhinged and varied this folklore gets, because the creature apparently has a ridiculously versatile skill set. First up, it reportedly uses hypnosis to lure you out onto the trestle. But say you've got a strong mind and that fails, well, it just pivots and mimics the voices of people you know to draw you in. Not a fan of psychological warfare? No problem. It also literally jumps down from the trestle onto the roofs of passing cars below, like some sort of woolly action hero. And if you happen to be on foot, it might just bypass the mind games entirely and attack you with a blood-stained axe. And finally, this is my absolute personal favorite, the very sight of the creature is reportedly so profoundly unsettling, so completely terrifying that victims are driven to willingly leap off the high trestle just to escape having to look at it. I mean, you have to admit, that is quite the resume for a local cryptid.
Up until now, this has been a pretty entertaining, kind of goofy ghost story about a magical farm animal. But the trestle is not abandoned, and this is where the Campfire Act really has to end. Because the real monster of Pope Lick Creek doesn't have hooves, it doesn't carry an axe, and it definitely doesn't know hypnosis. The real monster is the massive, heavy freight trains that use this major rail artery every single day. There's this incredibly common and tragically fatal misconception among thrill seekers that this bridge is out of commission. Let me be clear, it is absolutely not. Heavy freight trains cross this bridge several times daily.
The danger here is so incredibly real, and the area is so attractive for what we call legend tripping, where people deliberately travel to the sites of scary stories, that authorities actually had to step in. They constructed a massive 8-foot fence specifically to keep thrill seekers out. Now think about that. An 8-foot fence isn't built to keep a fictional goat man contained. It's built to keep curious, vulnerable human beings away from an active, highly deadly railway drop.
Norfolk Southern Railway, the company that actually operates the line, has explicitly urged citizens not to climb the trestle. They've stated loud and clear that if you're caught, you will be arrested. And honestly, getting arrested is the absolute best-case scenario here. The physical reality of this bridge is that it was designed for trains, not pedestrians. If you're caught atop that trestle, which by the way has absolutely nowhere safe to stand on the sides, and a train comes barreling down on you, you are completely trapped. You have nowhere to go but a fatal drop down to the creek below.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dark, heartbreaking core of this explainer. What starts as a fun, spooky story whispered at high school sleepovers literally transforms into a fatal reality. This isn't just a fun myth anymore, it's a site of genuine repeated tragedy. The legend of the Goat Man has actively lured people into real mechanical danger.
I want to solemnly walk you through this timeline because it's vital to understand that these aren't campfire stories anymore. These are real people who lost their lives chasing a myth. In 1988, a 17-year-old young man named Jack J.C. Charles Bond II was hit and killed by a train here, and another young man was injured while trying to cross. In 1994, a man died a horrific death after his ATV overturned right on the trestle, physically trapping him on the tracks exactly as the train approached. Fast forward to 2000, a 19-year-old man fell to his death after encountering a train on the bridge. In 2016, a 26-year-old tourist from Ohio, Raquel Bain, died after being hit by a train while she and her boyfriend were actually searching for the monster. He only survived by perilously hanging off the side of the trestle as the train passed by. And as recently as May 2019, 15-year-old Savannah Bright was pronounced dead at the scene while her friend, teenager Kaylee Keeling, somehow survived with injuries.
It's an incredibly sobering reality, isn't it? One that contrasts so sharply with the absurdity of a part sheep, part goat creature. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a haunting question. Is the thrill of a ghost story ever really worth the very real risk? The Pope Lick monster might be a fascinating, wildly imaginative piece of local lore, but those freight trains, they're real, they're heavy, and they are entirely unforgiving. It really begs the question, why are we, as human beings, so relentlessly drawn to the very myths that we know might destroy us?